Jatinga, Assam, after the monsoon. A village lamp switches on, and young birds begin dropping toward it through the fog. They are not committing suicide, so what turns this one narrow ridge into a trap? This is the truth behind Jatinga's falling birds. Jatinga sits on a ridge in Assam's Dima Hasao district, about 9 kilometers from Haflong. It is a small village attached to an enormous story. The event does not happen every night. It appears during a narrow seasonal window, broadly from August to November, with September and October often identified as the peak. Even then, several conditions recur together: a dark or moonless sky, fog or drizzle, strong winds, and artificial light. They appear contributory, but the evidence does not show that every condition is individually necessary. Then birds emerge from the darkness. Some circle lamps, settle on roofs or wires, strike trees and buildings, or land stunned on the ground. That strange descent produced a common label in Indian wildlife reporting: bird suicide. But suicide requires intent, and no evidence shows these birds intend to die. A collision is not suicide. Disorientation is not suicide. A bird stunned by light, weather, or impact has not made a choice to end its life. The label also merges very different outcomes. Some birds collide, some recover, and historically, some were caught or killed after lights brought them within human reach. Once those events are separated, the supernatural story weakens, yet the scientific question remains: why do vulnerable birds converge on lights in this place under these conditions? The first clue is scale. Popular accounts use mass suicide and falling bird framing, but the strongest study found a selective event involving only part of the region's bird life. Kalyan K. Gupta's 5-year study recorded about 50 affected species among more than 200 species found across the North Kashgar Hills. That is significant, but it is not every bird. The concentration was sharper still. Just 8 species accounted for 75% of the sightings, turning an apparent mass panic into a biological filter demanding explanation. Reported species include bitterns, herons, kingfishers, pittas, partridges, green pigeons, emerald doves, laughing thrushes, and drongos. They do not share one simple way of life. Some are associated with water. Others live in forest or dense undergrowth. A single explanation must account for birds from different habitats becoming vulnerable during the same weather window. Gupta's study was published in October 2001 after 5 years of observation. Its most revealing pattern concerned not where the birds came from, but their age. Most individual birds were subadults. The key biodiversity areas record likewise describes many as immature. But why juveniles and subadults are disproportionately affected remains unresolved. Inexperience is only an untested hypothesis. The second myth is that distant migrants arrive from across the world and suddenly plunge to their deaths. The research record does not support that sweeping claim. The KBA record says most affected birds were resident or locally migratory. The precise movements of the affected individuals between roosts, feeding areas, and flooded habitats were not established. That distinction matters. If local birds normally remain near familiar terrain, violent weather could push them from roosts into unfamiliar night flight before artificial light ever becomes involved. Heavy rain may also flood feeding areas, reduce food, or weaken some birds. Local naturalists have proposed these pressures, but controlled evidence has not established any one as the primary trigger. Weather can explain displacement, but not the final approach. For that, researchers repeatedly return to the brightest object in the darkness, the village lights. In clear conditions, a bird can use the horizon, stars, moon, and landscape. Fog scatters that information, while wind makes stable flight harder, and drizzle reduces visibility further. An artificial lamp then becomes a powerful point of contrast. The evidence supports attraction or misdirection by artificial light, but it does not establish the bird's prior condition, how the response works, or how far they approach from. Wind, fog, and artificial light may jointly disorient birds and increase the risk of collision or grounding. But researchers have not demonstrated one detailed flight sequence that explains every arrival. This is attraction in the practical sense, not hypnosis. A visible light offers direction when every natural landmark has vanished, even if following it increases danger. Gupta's interpretation added the moon. Birds flying during autumn movement may use moonlight, then become misdirected by artificial lights when the moon is absent. The study strengthens the light and darkness explanation. It does not prove a complete chain for every species, every night, or every collision, and it does not solve the narrow location. Because lights exist throughout Assam, fog covers many ridges. Moonless nights return every month. Yet Jatinga's arrivals have been associated with one unusually constrained corridor. KBA and tourism material repeatedly describe the attraction zone as roughly 1.5 kilometers long and 200 meters wide. That figure is historical, not a verified modern GPS boundary. Still, the localization appears real. The ridge may funnel wind and fog along a particular direction, carrying displaced birds toward a line where human lights become visible. The human history begins with a story dated to 1905. Later accounts say Jatinga settlers searched at night for a tiger-killed buffalo and saw birds approaching their lights. This account was preserved in later publications and reporting, not in a contemporaneous 1905 document. It belongs to Jatinga's oral history, but its details cannot be treated as independently witnessed fact. According to the tradition, fear gradually became opportunity. Lights were raised, birds came close, and villagers began taking them for food, a practice later records describe in far less romantic terms. By the 1960s, wildlife writing had brought the phenomenon wider attention. The central puzzle was already clear. Why were normally daytime birds moving through dangerous darkness? Formal scientific attention intensified in the late 1970s. Sources disagree on whether one key phase began in 1977 or 1979, so the precise starting year remains unsettled. Researchers watched birds converge during dark, rainy nights, tested environmental ideas, and considered whether unusual electrical or geomagnetic effects might disrupt orientation. The mystery widened faster than the evidence. A 1988 report in Nature said 8 years of study had not established a complete cause. Geomagnetic ideas remained hypotheses, not demonstrated answers. No reproducible field evidence located for this dossier links a measured magnetic anomaly directly to the bird's behavior. The theory survives because the site is strange, not because the mechanism is proven. The most uncomfortable evidence does not concern magnetism. It concerns what happened after confused birds entered the pool of light. Historical descriptions say people placed lamps where birds would approach, then struck them with bamboo poles or caught them by hand. Human action turned vulnerability into casualties. Killed or captured. Those 3 words change the case. They mean historical death counts cannot automatically be described as birds falling dead from the sky, because capture and deliberate killing were mixed into the record. The KBA record preserves reports of hundreds taken in one night and thousands in 1997. These figures were not independently audited, so they should remain reported estimates, not exact totals. Debunking inflated numbers does not minimize the harm. It identifies the harm correctly and prevents the word suicide from erasing the people, tools, and lights involved. Authorities eventually used light in a different way. The Forest Department built bird-watching towers, including a floodlit tower intended to draw birds away from hunters' lamps. A bird-watching club was formed in 1982. The intervention showed that officials considered artificial light a practical control point, even before scientists had settled the deeper mechanism. That practical logic survives today. Control dangerous lights, patrol vulnerable areas, rescue stunned birds, and work with residents. None of those steps requires pretending every scientific question is solved. But progress proved fragile. In October 2017, a report that birds had again been caught and killed triggered a magisterial inquiry by the district administration. The deputy commissioner called for permanent measures involving the Forest Department, villagers, and the Autonomous Council. The incident showed that protecting birds in the fog required coordinated local enforcement. 2 years later, the danger came from an unexpected source, a festival meant to celebrate Jatinga and promote awareness of its birds. A complaint alleged that bright lights, loud music, and late-night activity could attract or disturb birds at the very site where darkness, weather, and light already created risk. The Forest Department said precautions had been taken and birds found at the site were released. The dispute exposed a real paradox. Celebrating the phenomenon could recreate its hazardous conditions. The lesson is broader than Jatinga. Wildlife tourism can promote awareness and ecotourism objectives, yet careless lighting, noise, and crowds may place the advertised wildlife under new pressure. By December 2024, local reporting described reduced hunting after campaigns involving the Forest Department, district administration, Autonomous Council, and community organizations. Observers also reported fewer birds at Jatinga and possible movement toward nearby Daihing or Dohing. They suggested rainfall, humidity, climate, and development, but no standardized long-term census proves the trend or cause. Across more than a century, Jatinga's story moved from oral tradition to wildlife mystery, scientific study, enforcement disputes, and conservation. Each stage changed the explanation without completely closing the case. The government of Assam's visitor page, updated in July 2026, says bird killing is banned. Assam Tourism now presents the Bird Festival as a conservation awareness event. Those are official public positions, not proof that every bird is safe. Public data still do not provide a consistent annual count of arrivals, injuries, killings, recoveries, and species. Without that record, fewer sightings remain difficult to interpret. Possible explanations include successful light control, less hunting, habitat change, altered rainfall, or relocation toward Daihing. But the evidence does not yet distinguish among them. And on the right night, the physical danger can still assemble quickly. Wind rises, fog closes over the ridge, the moon disappears, and an exposed light burns through the dark. So what can the evidence actually explain? First, the birds are not choosing death. They are vulnerable animals behaving under abnormal conditions. Second, weather likely displaces or disorients at least some birds. Fog, drizzle, and wind remove stable visual cues and may force young birds into night flight. Third, artificial light is strongly supported as an immediate trigger or concentrating force, especially on moonless nights. Historical use of lamps to attract birds makes that connection impossible to ignore. Fourth, people historically magnified the casualties by capturing or killing birds after they arrived. The suicide story concealed that human role behind a dramatic but false word. What remains unresolved is the exact recipe. How much wind, how dense the fog, how bright the light, which flight direction, and why this narrow ridge selects mostly young birds. A complete answer would require synchronized measurements of weather, moonlight, terrain, lighting, and individual bird movements across many seasons. Not another sensational headline. Future monitoring could also separate collisions, temporary shock, rescue, capture, and deliberate killing. Only then could researchers compare today's protected Jatinga with its historical record. Until then, both extreme stories fail. Jatinga is neither a valley of suicidal birds nor a force beyond science. It is a partly explained collision of biology, weather, terrain, light, and history. The mystery became famous because birds seemed to choose death. The truth is more complex. Many affected birds were young and approached or were misdirected by lights. Some collided, landed, became stunned or recovered, while others were captured or killed. If the birds are now appearing less often, is that proof Jatinga has protected them, or a warning that the habitat itself is changing?